Our next speaker is Ján Skrobák from Comenius University in Bratislava. The title of his lecture is Possible Future Legislative and Social Trends in the Protection of State, National and Community Symbols in Slovakia. Ján, the floor is yours.
Many thanks. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to thank for the opportunity to come again and to speak at this conference. My presentation and my paper builds on the chapter in the monograph that was already introduced today. So within my research, I wanted to add some levels that were not omitted in the chapter, but that were not present to such an extent that would be sufficient in my view. So I wanted to add some remarks concerning possible future legislative trends concerning state symbols, symbols of self-governing regions, municipalities, communities, and other symbols that I spoke about and that we wrote about in the monograph. First of all, I'm going to speak about the constitutional level of the matter. So I should introduce this part of my contribution with the most important thing, and that is that, in my opinion, there is no need to change the regulation of state symbols contained in the Slovak constitution. So, by saying this, I already spoiled a bit the first half of my presentation, but it will be basically me explaining the reasons why I think that it's not necessary to change the constitutional regulation of state symbols in the Slovak Republic. So what are the reasons why I came to this conclusion? So first of all, despite the fact that the Slovak constitution is the Slovak constitutional regulation of state symbols is rather succinct, so it's rather minimalist, I found no non-functional elements in this regulation, so that's the first reason. It basically works well, so there is no need to change it. And in my opinion, it also provides sufficient constitutional protection and sufficient constitutional basis for the legal regulation of state symbols, and also it ensures enough esteem and respect for these symbols. Maybe one thing that should be discussed is to what extent does the Constitution in reality protect the state symbols, in the meaning, is it really that hard to, for example, change them, amend them, replace them by other symbols? I should say that the overall rigidity of the Slovak Constitution is comparatively low when compared to other constitutions. Basically, all it needs is a majority of 3/5 of all members of the National Council of the Slovak Republic, and the constitution can be amended. We already had several amendments to our constitution, which is not that old, it's 30 years old. So the rigidity is overall low, and thus also the constitutional regulation of the state symbols could be amended with relative ease. It's not that complicated. So maybe this is a question that I should discuss. Is it necessary to increase the rigidity of the constitutional regulation to protect the state symbols more, to make a change more complicated? There are several factors that needs to be addressed when discussing this topic. First of all, is there a real threat for the state symbols in the Slovak Republic? In the meaning, are there some calls to change them? Are there some powers, some groups that require the replacement of state symbols of the Slovak Republic by a new set of symbols? Basically, the answer is no, with one exception. And that is the state anthem of the Slovak Republic. There are two voices, let's put it like that, in the discourse on state symbols when it comes to a possible change of the state anthem. First of all, there are some suggestions to replace the existing state anthem, that's Lightning Over the Tatra, with another song, another hymn song, for example, Aká si mi krásna, How Beautiful You Are, or some other hymn song, because the current state anthem is considered to be a bit too revolutionary, and since the Slovaks have achieved their struggle to have an independent nation state, it seems to some as being outdated. That it's not necessary to have a revolutionary song as a national anthem or state anthem anymore. These are voices that we can hear repeatedly, including one of the former presidents of the Slovak Republic, Michal Kovács, who called for the change of the national anthem about 20 years ago. So maybe this is one reason why the anthem of the Slovak Republic is the only state symbol of our state that is in some kind of danger of being replaced. And the other topic is a possible change of text. There were, and maybe there still are, some discussions concerning only two monosyllabic words in the anthem, but these two monosyllabic words totally change the overall message of the anthem. First of all, it's the verse "Let's stop them against let's stop us." It's in the verse either "Zastavme ich bratia" or "Zastavme sa bratia." That means let's stop them brothers, or let's stop us brothers, or let's stop brothers, or let's pause brothers. So of course this is a very different message, and the other different message is who should be stopped. Or who will disappear after they will be stopped, because there are two possibilities. It's either veď sa oni stratia or veď sa oni stratia. Oni versus oni. Oni means group of persons, and oni probably would refer to thunderstorms. So it's a small difference, but with a huge semantic impact. So because of this, these are probably the only discussions I am aware of as of now when it comes to state symbols in the Slovak Republic. So basically they are not in danger of change as of now. But of course, in the Central European space, we know that it can happen very fast, that for example, some political powers could arise that would require the change of state symbols. Alexandra spoke about it already, speaking about the communist star which was included in a lot of state symbols in the communist era. So of course also the Czechoslovak state symbols were amended back then, and it's possible that this could happen again. So when it comes to this, yes, the Constitution of the Slovak Republic does not provide an overall too rigid protection to the state symbols, because it could be amended with relative ease. But of course, is the necessity to protect the state symbols, should the necessity to protect the state symbols be the reason to increase the overall rigidity of the constitution of a state? In my opinion, that would be an overkill, because I do not want to diminish the importance of state symbols. Of course, they are extremely important, but when it comes to values that are expressed, and rights and obligations that are expressed in every constitution, in the end, the symbols are probably not the most important. They are not the core of the material core of a constitution. They are important, but for example, the protection of basic rights and freedoms is probably more important. So should the requirement arise to increase the rigidity of state symbols, it should be the rigidity of the constitutional regulation of state symbols. It should be discussed in a broader picture, not only concerning the state symbols, but of course the rigidity of the constitution as a whole. And this is a very complicated and also sensitive issue, so I would not suggest to change the rigidity of the constitution just to protect the state symbols more. It should be a part of a broader political and legal discussion. Another thing I need to mention is that, in my opinion, no matter how rigid the constitution is, should there be a dramatic change in a social and value paradigm in a Slovak society or any society, not even an extremely rigid constitution would and could prevent a change of state symbols. Basically, should, for example, some totalitarian government come to power, I don't think a rigid constitution would stop them in changing the symbols. And in such an event, I don't think that the question of state symbols would be the most pressing issue. Should, for example, deep change happen in the political paradigm of our society, I am afraid we would solve other problems and not state symbols. Another thing I wanted to add is the fact that the nature of state symbols is by nature a posteriori. So the state symbols always reflect some social and political reality in the state, and if such realities should change fundamentally, of course the symbols will change as well. Not even a very rigid constitution will be able to prevent such a change. So, as I have already said in the beginning, my conclusion when it comes to constitutional protection of state symbols, I think it's sufficient, it's functional. I have not identified any problems in the Slovak constitution, in the Slovak constitutional regulation of state symbols. And in my opinion, the fact that the constitution is not that rigid is maybe should be discussed, but not because of the rigidity of the regulation of state symbols, but because of the rigidity overall. In our constitution, there is no reference, no regulation to symbols of self-governing regions, municipalities, and other communities. In my opinion, it's not necessary to add a regulation of the right of municipalities and self-governing regions to have and to use their own symbols, because of course it would improve their position, but only symbolically. So I don't think it's necessary to amend the constitution to increase the status of self-government in a symbolic way. Probably more important would be to introduce the concept of the right to self-government as an explicit constitutional regulation, because as of now there is lack of explicit constitutional regulation of this right, and it's necessary for the Constitutional Court to fill this gap. When it comes to community symbols, symbols of communities and minorities in the Slovak constitution, again, there is no such regulation in the Slovak constitution. Of course, we could discuss whether there should be such a regulation. I think this should be assessed in the context of the existing constitutional regulation, and of course also in the context of the political reality. When it comes to rights of persons belonging to national minorities, the paradigm of the Slovak constitution is that this regulation is aimed at individual rights of subjective nature, and the bearers of these rights are natural persons and not their associations. So, in my opinion, an abstract constitutional regulation of the protection of national community symbols would require to change this paradigm, to change this concept to some extent. Of course, this would be a very sensitive political issue. I think that if someone would propose an amendment to the constitution aimed at constitutionally regulating a symbol of national minorities, this would be probably feasible only under very exceptional political circumstances, or maybe it would be not feasible, politically feasible at all, knowing the mindset of the Slovak political landscape. What is the principal risk of introducing constitutional regulation of national minority symbols? At least in my opinion, I'm open for discussion, but in my opinion, the legal risk in doing so is the fact that these symbols are also, at least in some cases, symbols of foreign countries. So by constitutionally protecting the symbols of national communities, the Slovak constitution would also, via facti, provide constitutional protection to foreign state symbols, and this could interfere with the existing legal regulation of state symbols of the Slovak Republic. Of course, constitution is more important and stronger than organic laws, but as it stands, this would interfere with the existing legal regulation of state symbols of the Slovak Republic, because of course the Slovak Republic grants some preferential regime to their own state symbols. That's normal, that's something we have to understand, that every state prefers the protection of its own symbols because it's an expression of its sovereignty. Another problem is that it would interfere with the current legal regulation of the use of foreign state symbols. Of course, these legal problems could be addressed by changing the Act on State Symbols Act. I proposed also some amendments to other laws. So this is the second part of my contribution. First of all, and that's the only proposal for an amendment to our State Symbols Act that I made. In 2019, there was a strict regulation introduced when it comes to use of the coat of arms of the Slovak Republic on sports clothings of the official sports representations of our state. So, in my opinion, this regulation is too unreasonably rigid, and I think these representations could be allowed also to use some other symbols, like for example our national ice hockey team cannot use any other symbol on their jerseys, only the coat of arms of the Slovak Republic. And it's quite common and usual that other national teams use some other symbols. For example, as far as I know, our Czech friends don't always use the coat of arms of the Czech Republic. They sometimes use some kind of logo, and also well known is, for example, the use of the three crowns of the Tre Kronor on the jerseys of, for example, the ice hockey representation of Sweden, or the Canadian maple leaf. So I think when, for example, the Swedes can use the three crowns and not their coat of arms, it's unreasonably strict to require our representations to always use only the coat of arms and no other symbols. This is the only proposed change. I know you may think, why am I speaking that long about ice hockey sports jerseys, but ice hockey is very, very important in Slovakia. So this is a very important issue in my country. I also discussed in the paper possible amendments to the Criminal Code and to the Infringements Act due to the fact that there is an unclear dividing line between infringements under Section 42 of the Infringements Act and criminal offenses, the criminal offense of disorderly conduct under section 364 of the Slovak Criminal Code when it comes to the words derogation and defamation. So in case of the infringement, the word derogation is used. In case of the criminal offense, it's defamation. I don't see a very clear distinction between these words. Of course, derogation is not so serious like defamation, but in some cases there could be a discussion whether it's an infringement or a criminal offense. I tried to come up with a solution. For example, I discussed the possibility that in the case of the infringement, the culpability would be based only on negligence, but I came to the conclusion that it would lead to some cases of not very just approach to some cases. So in the end, I found no better solution than to keep the existing regulation of these misdemeanors and infringements, and to base the difference on the so-called substantive corrective as regulated in paragraph 10, section 2 of our criminal code. In the existing regulation, there is no risk of violating of the nebis in idem principle, but the unclear relationship could pose some problems when it comes to legal certainty and the principle nullum crimen sine lege certa. Another amendment I proposed is a creation of a new separate criminal offense protecting state symbols. The reason why I proposed it is that the value that is protected in this case is quite different compared to other subtypes of the crime of disorderly conduct. So it's basically not only public order, but it's the dignity of a state symbol, which is a value per se. So I think it would deserve a special protection under criminal law, and thus I suggested a new criminal offense. I also proposed some amendments to the Act on Sports Events and on the regulation of the use of official stamps of regional self-government, but since I'm out of time, I will discuss them if you should be interested in the discussion. Many thanks for your attention, and I'm looking for the discussion.